What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Third Place Gaming. My name is Brad, and today we're going to do something a little bit different. Normally I just do free-to-play review games, but today we're going to focus on doing a versus between two fairly well-known, fairly popular free-to-play games. Right now that's going to be Old School Runescape and Albion Online. Now, both of these games, like I said, they're free-to-play, they have a huge fan base, they're fairly popular, and so I figured we'd go ahead and just jump into it. Here we go. Alright, so we're going to be checking these games out on a few different scales here, because I want to make sure we get the most accurate representation for each game. So the first thing we're going to look at is the world. Now, both games are very large. They have huge open world areas to move around in. You can pretty much do anything, go anywhere, things like that. Now, when I was playing through the games, Albion Online, it kind of walks you through it. As you do the tutorial, it kind of takes you place to place, and then when you're done with the tutorial, it's go talk to this person in this zone, go talk to this person in this zone. Very reminiscent of how games like World of Warcraft tend to function, where they kind of hold your hand and guide you through. With Old School RuneScape, it is more of a, there you go. You finish the tutorial island, and then you're in the game, and you're just off on your own. There are things that can kind of guide you around, different quests that you can do, different things that you can kind of follow, to make sure that you kind of keep progressing, you don't get too lost in the game, but it's not as hand-holdy. I will also say, again, I'm not sure about Albion, as I did not play all the way through the entire game, as that would take forever, but I do know for a fact that with Old School RuneScape, there is a portion of the map that is locked behind the membership wall. If you are a free-to-play player, there is still a ton of access and a ton of stuff you can do, but there's a huge portion that you don't get to go to until you pay that membership. And so just for that basis alone, and I don't want to judge it too harshly because we'll get into that, but I will say that based off that, for having what's available to you, how it kind of guides you through that, I'm going to go ahead and have to give this point for World to Albion Online. Alright guys, next up is going to be gameplay. Now, both of these games have a ton of choices, tons of different things you can do, and you are not really limited much. Now, with the games, with Old School RuneScape, the gameplay for that game, it's very massive. If you want to be the guy that focuses on nothing but combat, you can do that. You can be just a straight up PvPer. There are tons of YouTubers out there, many of which I enjoy watching for hours, that they can just, it's just PvP challenge. It's just player versus player, just grinding it out. Then there are other YouTubers who I also enjoy watching where it's all about skilling and about the challenge and things like that. And so RuneScape does not limit your ability to find your niche when it comes to playing this game. And so RuneScape really gives you the option to, a lot of games say that you can play how you want to play, but RuneScape really gives you the option to do what you want to do. Now, with Albion Online, it's also very similar. You can do crafting, combat. There's the holy trinity of combat. You know, you got your melee, archery, magic. But I will say that I noticed with that game, combat is essential. With it, in order to progress the story, there are missions that require you to kill or defeat enemies. And so if you didn't want to play that game, or if you didn't want to do combat, you would have an issue, because you're at least starting out, from what I could see, you have to do the combat. With RuneScape, once you're off Tutorial Island, combat is completely optional. If you want to do quests, then yeah, you're going to have to do some combat. It's not 100% avoidable, and it's not like you can access all the game's content, but there's still a ton you can do without ever touching it. There are people's main accounts who are just skillers. And so for gameplay, I'm going to have to go ahead and give that point to RuneScape. Basically, just because of the fact of what you can do and how many different options are available to you. Alright, next up is going to be the endgame content. Now this one, I will be honest, I did not do the endgame content because, again, I did not have the time to grind it out to endgame for both of these games. Instead, what I did is I did some research. I spoke with some other players who are active in these games and have a first-hand information and first-hand knowledge about what it's like. So, first up with Albion, basically from what they told me, is the endgame focuses on crafting your gear, running dungeons, and PvP. What they said is once you leave the starting zones, all bets are off. PvP is, whether you want it or not, people are out there, they're hunting you, and so you better be ready. And if you're a huge fan of PvP, then that is definitely going to be something that you're going to want to do. But if PvP is not your go-to thing, then you might have an issue with that. And while the end game is nice for that crafting and that grind, unlike with, games like World of Warcraft, where you run dungeon after dungeon after dungeon for that, 0.1% chance of getting that rare drop or that rare loot. It's kind of nice knowing that it's just a matter of grinding it out and getting the mats to go ahead and finish the process. With old school RuneScape, again, the endgame content for this one is way more diverse. You have the option to do raids, you have the option to focus on getting that gear, you have the option of, crafting max tier stuff, you have the option of grinding out the skills to level 99 to put in that work and go for a max account, which there are very few of. It just feels like there is a ton more options when it comes to endgame for old school RuneScape. They also include things like bossing, which if you're a huge fan of bossing like myself, RuneScape has a ton of bosses, and they range from, a low-level crazy person in the PvP zones all the way up to like what they call the God Wars dungeons, where you are taking on the gods from the RuneScape lore, which is really fun. They also have huge 4-man raids that have a chance to drop some of the most valuable loot in the game. It's just a ton of content for you to do, so it's not like once you've gotten a max count, you're done, you're good. They have a thing you can do where it's a collection log, and the whole purpose is to keep doing boss after boss to try and get those rare drops. If you enjoy collecting pets, they have a pet system where bosses drop pets that you can go ahead and pick those up and work on collecting that and focusing on that. And so, I hate to do it 2 in a row, but for endgame content, again, only going based off of interviews and research I could find, have to go to old school RuneScape. Now this next category is not going to be a specific winner, but it's going to be more like things that kind of push or pull in either direction. And so this is just going to kind of be some like important information to have before making your decision. So in Albion, during the tutorial, you get a horse. RuneScape, there is no horses, there are no mounts. As of yet, there's been rumors for years that there might be, but currently there are no mounts in-game. And so if you're a person who wants to focus on getting mounts, focus on that particular aspect of a game, then Albion might be more appealing to you. I will also say, from what I could find, Albion did not have a teleport system. With old school RuneScape, one of the reasons you don't have a mount is the fact that you have magic, which can just zap you anywhere you want to go within reason. So the travel system is very different between the two of them. Again, if that's something that's really important to you, make sure you keep that in mind. Now, this next one was a big one for me personally. As a person who has played a ton of old school RuneScape, the banking system in the game is set up where you have X amount of spots to store your items, but all the banks are connected. So you can go to one city, drop off all your gear, teleport halfway across the map, access your gear from that bank. To me, that's just how it is. I mean, that's how it is with most MMOs. In Albion Online, banks are locally stored. So, if you drop off an item in one bank, and then you teleport halfway or you run halfway across the map, you are out of luck if you did not bring your items with you. Huge inconvenience, especially if you're in the process of doing a quest or you're in the process of crafting a particular item and you forget that one thing. Instead of just going to the closest bank, you have to go all the way back. That also brings in an issue because what I encountered towards the beginning of the game was an encumbrance issue. You could only have X amount of items on you. Once your percentage hit 100, you could not move. With old school RuneScape, they have it where there are 28 slots in your inventory. It doesn't matter how heavy the items are, once those 28 are filled up. And so again, that's a huge difference there. I know a lot of games take into account the encumbrance, like Skyrim, where once you get over a certain weight, you can barely move, you can't fast travel, you can't use mounts. Again, these are just kind of small little notes to keep in mind when choosing the game that you would like to go ahead and invest your time into. Lastly is going to be the membership. Now, both of these games do offer a free-to-play version and then a premium or membership version. Both of the games are about the same amount, coming in at roughly $12 a month with annual purchase options and whatever that is for you. Now, they also both offer the option to purchase in-game currency. Now, with both of these games and with most games that are like this, real-world trading is a huge no-no. Typically doing that in old school RuneScape will get you banned. I'm not sure about how it works with Albion, but I would assume it's a very similar process since it was a whole huge section in the terms of usage and service that you have to read before you go ahead and get started. Now, with the $12 membership with RuneScape comes access to the entire map, which is a huge map. It increases it basically doubles or triples the amount of content that you have for the game. It adds over like 200 quests for you to complete. It adds about 13 other skills that you can work on and train. It adds the option to have a player-owned house that you can customize, decorate, build in. You can access the farming ability to make your own potions, food. It increases the amount of stuff that you're able to do tenfold. With Albion, the premium membership gives you access to a private island where you can raise animals, crops. You can do the whole farming aspect there as well with a private area to do it in. It also increases by 50% the amount of silver and loot that drops from enemies. It also gives you a passive buff to your XP gain. Now, some people might enjoy that. I feel like it kind of detracts a little bit, but I also get where if you want to level up quickly in a game, you don't want to necessarily waste all that time. Having that 50% bump is not a bad idea. Now, back to the purchasing of currency. Through Albion, it's just straight up $5 gets you X amount of gold or X amount of silver. I don't remember what currency they use. And so it's very straightforward. If you want to spend the money, they'll give you cash for it. With old school RuneScape, they use a very similar system. However, it kind of benefits anyone or everyone involved. They use a bond system for roughly, I believe it's $6 for a single bond. They give you, again, it's called a bond. You can redeem that for one of several different services. It's a 14-day membership. I believe it also is a name change token if you've already used a free one that you're given. And it just kind of gives you smaller things like that. Or you can take it to the Grand Exchange, which is the player auction house, and you can go ahead and sell that for whatever the current market price is. And that market price does fluctuate, which is very interesting in and of itself. One time you may be able to get 4 million gold for a bond, other times it's, pushing 6 or 7. That could be a huge drawback if you've went and spent a bunch of money on bonds and you're making very little from it. Something to keep in mind. But those bonds can then be used by players who don't want to put in their credit card, don't want to use, private information like that to buy a membership for a game. They can use in-game currency to purchase the bonds that you've put on the exchange to go ahead and fuel their membership. So it's kind of a cyclical relationship, which is kind of nice. Alright, so now it comes down to the verdict. Having given the gameplay, the world building, the keynotes, all that important information, both of these games are very similar and they both do a lot of stuff very well. They are very well done games. They each have their own aesthetic, their own design. They each have drawbacks and they each have huge advantages. However, I would say, first off, as a disclaimer, if you've got the time, check them both out. They're free to play games that take 5 minutes to download, and once you get past the tutorial, you can quickly decide if this is going to be something you enjoy or not. That being said, if you don't have the time to check them both out, or you just don't want to check them both out, I cannot recommend old school RuneScape enough. I have personally wasted years playing this game, and I have still not been able to access all the content available because of the fact that there is just so much to do. Now, I'm not saying through this that Albion Online is not a good game or that anyone that plays it should leave it for old school RuneScape. I'm just saying that looking at the two games objectively side by side, if you had to choose, I would definitely say go with old school RuneScape. So that is going to go ahead and wrap up this first ever episode of Versus. Like I said, if you enjoyed this kind of content, this video in particular, make sure you go ahead and subscribe down below and leave a like. Go ahead and throw in the comment section if there's any other games that you're curious to see how they stack up with each other. I've got a few other ones that I'm thinking I might go ahead and do if this video gets any traction at all. But in the meantime, peace.